On the West African coast, bordered by Sierra Leone, Guinea, Ivory Coast, and the Atlantic Ocean, sits Liberia, a country of about 5.5 million people with a history unlike almost any other nation on the continent. Its capital, Monrovia, is named after an American president. Its official language is English. Its national story is tied to both Africa and the United States, to freedom and colonization, to democracy and dictatorship, to devastating wars and a difficult peace. Liberia is often described as Africa's oldest continuously independent republic, but that simple phrase hides a much more complicated reality. To understand Liberia, you have to begin with the contradiction at its heart. It was founded as a homeland for freed and freeborn black people from the Americas, but it was built on land already inhabited by many African communities with their own languages, identities, and political systems. Liberia's modern origin began in the early 1800s with the American Colonization Society, usually called the ACS. In the United States, the ACS promoted the idea of relocating free black Americans to Africa. Supporters had different motives. Some believed free black people would never be accepted as equal citizens in the United States. Others saw colonization as a way to remove free black communities from American society. Many black Americans opposed the project, arguing that they were Americans and had a right to freedom and equality where they were born. But others did migrate. Beginning in 1822, thousands of freeborn and formerly enslaved African Americans, along with Afro-Caribbeans, settled along the coast that would become Liberia. They brought American-style institutions, Christianity, architecture, clothing, and political ideas. Over time, they developed a distinct identity, Americo-Liberian. The founding of Liberia is often framed as a return to Africa, but for the people already living there, it was also a process of colonization. The settlers arrived on land inhabited by indigenous groups with long-established societies and trade networks. Today, Liberia is home to more than 20 indigenous languages, reflecting deep ethnic and cultural diversity. But in the 19th century, political power came to be concentrated in the hands of the Americo-Liberian minority, whose institutions were modeled partly on the United States. Their settlements along the coast grew into a political entity that declared independence on July 26, 1847. Liberia became a republic, with a constitution, a flag resembling the American flag, and Monrovia as its capital. Yet independence did not mean equality for all people within its borders. For much of Liberia's early history, political rights and influence were dominated by the settler elite. Liberia's independence made it exceptional in African history. In the late 19th century, European empires divided most of Africa during the scramble for Africa. Liberia and Ethiopia were the two major exceptions often cited as avoiding full European colonization. Ethiopia later endured Italian occupation from 1936 to 1941, while Liberia maintained its formal independence. But Liberia's survival was not guaranteed. It had to navigate pressure from European powers, limited state control beyond coastal areas, and deep internal divisions. The United States, despite Liberia's American connections, did not formally recognize Liberian independence until 1862, during the American Civil War. This delayed recognition reveals Liberia's uncertain diplomatic position. It was independent but vulnerable. It was African, but shaped by American institutions. It was a republic, but one where power was not evenly shared. In the early 20th century, Liberia's economy was transformed by foreign investment, especially from the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. Firestone secured a major rubber concession in Liberia, creating one of the world's largest rubber plantations. This brought roads, jobs, revenue, and a stronger link between Liberia and the global economy. But it also tied the country's development to foreign corporate power and plantation labor. Rubber changed Liberia's workforce, land use, and environment. It connected Liberia to industrial demand abroad, especially in the United States, where rubber was vital for tires and manufacturing. The arrangement helped the Liberian government gain income and international relevance, but it also raised questions that would continue for generations: who benefited from Liberia's natural resources, and who paid the social and environmental costs? World War II strengthened Liberia's relationship with the United States. Liberia supported the American war effort against Nazi Germany, and in return received important investment in infrastructure. Roads, ports, and transport links improved, helping the country integrate more fully into international trade. After the war, President William Tubman became the central figure in Liberia's mid-20th century rise. Tubman promoted what he called national unification, seeking to reduce some divisions between Americo-Liberians and indigenous Liberians, while also encouraging foreign investment through an open-door economic policy. Under his rule, Liberia's international profile grew. The country became a founding member of the League of Nations, the United Nations, and later the Organization of African Unity. For a time, Liberia seemed to represent stability, diplomacy, and prosperity in a region undergoing rapid change. But beneath that image of stability, Liberia's political system remained deeply unequal. Americo-Liberian dominance persisted for well over a century, and many indigenous Liberians remained excluded from real political power. William Tubman's successor, William Tolbert, inherited a country facing rising pressure for reform. Economic inequality, political frustration, and resentment toward the ruling elite became harder to contain. In 1980, these tensions exploded in a military coup led by Master Sergeant Samuel Doe. Tolbert was killed, and the long era of Americo-Liberian rule came to an abrupt end. Doe became Liberia's first indigenous head of state, a symbolic turning point. But the coup did not produce a stable democracy. Instead, Doe established an authoritarian regime, and political repression, ethnic favoritism, and economic decline pushed the country toward disaster. The First Liberian Civil War began in 1989, when rebel forces led by Charles Taylor launched an uprising against Samuel Doe's government. What followed was one of West Africa's most brutal conflicts. The war was not simply a battle between government and rebels. It fractured into competing armed groups, ethnic revenge, child soldiers, massacres, looting, and the collapse of state authority. Doe was captured and killed in 1990, but his death did not end the war. Instead, Liberia descended further into chaos. Regional peacekeepers intervened, but violence continued for years. By the time a peace process led to elections in 1997, the country had been profoundly damaged. Charles Taylor won the presidency, partly because many Liberians believed voting for him might finally stop the fighting. Taylor's presidency did not bring lasting peace. His rule became increasingly authoritarian, and Liberia remained entangled in regional conflict. In 1998, a second civil war erupted as rebel groups challenged Taylor's government. Once again, civilians paid the highest price. The country's institutions, already weakened, were pushed toward collapse. By 2003, international pressure, rebel advances, and internal exhaustion forced Taylor to resign. The two civil wars together killed an estimated 250,000 people, roughly 8% of Liberia's population, and displaced many more. The economy shrank by about 90%. Infrastructure was destroyed, schools and hospitals were devastated, and an entire generation grew up surrounded by fear and instability. Liberia's wars were not just political events, they were national traumas that reshaped every part of society. The 2003 peace agreement marked the beginning of Liberia's modern recovery. International peacekeepers helped stabilize the country, and democratic elections followed in 2005. Since then, Liberia has remained relatively stable compared with the years of civil war. That stability matters enormously. Rebuilding after such destruction requires more than holding elections. It means restoring trust in government, rebuilding roads and public services, supporting education, reintegrating former fighters, and creating jobs for people whose lives were disrupted by conflict. Liberia's post-war journey has been difficult, but the country has shown resilience. Its democratic institutions have faced pressure, but peaceful transfers of power and continued civic engagement have helped Liberia move away from the cycle of coups and war that defined the late 20th century. Today, Liberia's economy still depends heavily on natural resources. Mining has been an important economic driver since the 1960s, especially iron ore, but mining activity largely stopped during the civil wars. After the wars ended, industrial mining expanded again, offering government revenue, exports, and employment. Yet the industry remains controversial. Communities have raised concerns about low wages, difficult working conditions, poor housing, and unequal benefits. Environmental damage is also a major issue. Mining can contribute to deforestation, water pollution, and air pollution, especially when oversight is weak. These problems echo Liberia's older resource dilemma. Foreign investment can bring growth, but without strong institutions and fair regulation, it can also deepen inequality and damage local communities. The question is not simply whether Liberia has resources, but whether those resources can support broad national development. Liberia's story is one of unusual beginnings and painful transformations. It is a country founded by people seeking freedom, yet shaped by exclusion. It avoided European colonization, yet developed its own internal hierarchy. It built international influence, then suffered dictatorship and civil war. And after enormous loss, it began the slow work of rebuilding. To understand Liberia is to move beyond simple labels like First Republic, American Experiment, or post-war state. Liberia is all of those things, but it is also a living society of many languages, communities, and memories. Its future depends on whether democracy can deepen, whether resources can be managed fairly, and whether the wounds of history can be acknowledged without trapping the country inside them. Liberia's past is complicated, but its survival is remarkable. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.